Hello and welcome to the Money Compass.
In each episode, we will be preparing you for your journey through the world of finance and helping you tick off the destinations on your financial itinerary.
Pack your bags and prepare for takeoff as you navigate your way to financial success.
Today I am joined by Gregor Sked, who is Protection Development and Technical Manager from Royal London. So thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Emma. Great to be here.
Well, I'm hoping today that you're going to be able to tell us a little bit more about some business protection.
Hope so. It's a really exciting topic.
Before we get stuck into that, I'm just hoping that you can tell me a little bit about who you are and what your role actually is at Royal London. It's a long title, so there must be something good about it.
I often say it is one of the longest job titles in the industry, and whether or not it means anything is another question. But as you say, so Royal London's Protection, Technical and Development Manager. And what that really consists of, even though if you look aside of the long job title, that is really about engaging advisors with the importance of protection, be that business protection, personal protection, and everything in between. And I spend most of my weeks traveling the length and breadth of the UK, delivering webinars, face-to-face events, it's smaller training sessions, and of course podcasts like today. It's another fantastic medium to get out and speak to the finance and the business community and the advisor community as well. So that is really what the role consists of. It's a heavily sort of teach-wise educational engagement role. I've been trying to build that importance and I guess love of protection, you could say.
I was going to say, you've obviously got a passion for it to be talking about it that much. So
you kind of need to. You need to have a little bit of passion for it. I think hopefully it helps. Hopefully it makes a bit of an impact.
Definitely. So that's a little bit about what you do, but tell us about you. How did you get to be in the position that you are today? What led you to it?
So it's when people see me standing up in front of a crowd of 100, 200 plus people, they say, Gregor, you must be mad. How on earth did you get into that role? And it is, as most jobs are, a little bit by chance. You never seem to, not always anyway, I wouldn't say you go straight for the type of job that you're always dreamt of doing. But I have spent about 5 or 6 years at Standard Life in a very similar type of role, but it was a lot more to do with engaging workplace pension customers with what their pension is, how that works. So I've always had a real love since doing that job of traveling and engaging people with particular products and value aspects of products. And I thought, through a matter of many different circumstances, decided to make the move into Royal London space a couple of years ago. And it was a big move, moving out of pensions into protection. But, I think for me, that love of being able to go out and speak to people and engage and try and educate around such important topics, be that pensions, be that protection, that's been the sort of driver to me moving into this role today. So there's never really that particular set path of how you get to a particular role. A lot of different luck and chance, and I'm very grateful for a lot of them. But it's I've always kind of had that love of sort of education engagement. So I've naturally followed roles that have led me to here.
Fantastic. So we're going to dive straight in. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what business protection specifically is and kind of how it works, what it is?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's in my role, personal protection, business protection, there are a lot of similarities. There are very different aspects to both either. I think when we look at business protection, the key thing to think about is that we're trying to essentially de-risk a business. Business protection at its core is about helping business owners plan for unexpected events. It allows them to have access to cover that can help them continue and help the business continue with minimal disruption. So that could be the loss of one or more key employees. It could be that a critical illness has been diagnosed. It could be a death. It could be a temporary disablement. And business protection is really this, I don't like using this phrase, insurance contract, but it is really that method of helping a business protect its financials, help it continue to operate, continue to do what it's there to do. And for a lot of the conversations that you might be having when it comes to personal protection, it's very similar. We're always going to be talking about life cover, critical illness, income protection, but all we're doing is putting a business label on it. Of course, there are some other considerations within there, but it's very similar to the conversations that we had on personal protection, but with a business spin. And as I always say, it's about making sure that business is de-risked as much as possible. If you think of what will a typical business be considering, as the risks that they might face. They might look towards fire, theft, floods, data protection breaches, competition, maybe resignation of lower grade employees, health and safety. These are all big concerns that many businesses will be having, and quite possibly could be paying over the odds to have protection off, to make sure they've got an insurance policy to cover those risks. But actually, many businesses often overlook an even greater risk to some of those options, which is the death or serious illness of a key person within that business, the people that drive it forward. So that really, in a nutshell, is what business protection is. And I think just one other thing to add in there, Emma, is that where we talk about business protection, there's really three main parts to it. You've got key person protection, you've got ownership protection, and loan protection. Those are really the three main areas that are worth considering when we talk about business protection.
Okay, then. So as you've dropped those three different types of protections in there, do you want to just give us a little kind of brief overview about what those three different types of protection are, so our listeners know what we're talking about?
Absolutely. So three main areas. We've got firstly key person protection. Now, key person protection is really there to help protect against the loss of revenue that a key person has within that business if they pass away or become critically ill. We've got ownership protection. Now, ownership protection can also be known as partnership or shareholder protection. And the point of ownership protection is really to make sure that other owners within the business can keep control of the business. So if one shareholder passes away or becomes critically ill, the other shareholders have the finances there to potentially purchase the shares of the deceased shareholder back. And again, it's really about keeping control of that business in the hands of the people that have built it. The third option is loan protection. And as the title kind of suggests, loan protection is really there to help repay outstanding financial commitments, maybe a director loan, maybe bank overdraft. So if the worst happened, the business again has the finances to repay those loans. So those are the three main. There is a fourth, but we might look at that a little bit later, and that's relevant life. So it's not strictly business protection, but it is a fantastic door opener if you are wanting to explore the business protection space a little bit further. So again, we can talk about that a little bit later.
I'm glad you dropped that one in there, because I was then thinking, hang on, I think there's another one. He hasn't mentioned that. I wonder what's happened to that one. So you've answered that one for me as well already then. So as I said to you earlier, we have lots of listeners and people in our Facebook group that are, some of them are self-employed, some of them might be a director of a company, a limited company. So there's lots of different people that are listening today. But what kind of person would you say needs kind of business protection? Is there a specific person that might have a need, or is it in general any business person?
It's a really good question. I think the first thing to think about is, well, secondly, we'll probably look at the implications of not having business protection. But I think firstly, the big risks largely lie with a lot of small to medium-sized enterprises. In saying that, some of the big organizations obviously will need to be factoring in the need for protection as well, but really business protection is a fantastic area for SMEs to be considering as an area for their protection and longevity. Mainly because sometimes these small to medium-sized enterprises don't have the significant amount of capital. They don't necessarily have the resources as some of these huge big corporations do have. If the worst were to happen, if a key person passed away within a large business, it could be significantly detrimental. It could be really impactful, but they might have a significant amount of capital. They may have different succession plans in place. So for larger organizations, it will be a big risk, a big factor, but it might not have as much of an impact that the loss of a key person, the serious illness of a key person could have for smaller businesses. So we would tend to say that business protection is a conversation for your small to medium-sized enterprises. And when we think about the implications of not having business protection, so some of the problems that businesses might face are loss of profit, the need to recruit, maybe retrain replacements, the loss of important personal or business contacts as well, maybe difficulties meeting loan repayments, potentially loss of confidence from suppliers or customers, difficulties actually raising finance to maybe start new projects, new developments. A big one's obviously loss of knowledge. If we're talking small to medium-sized businesses, these are often going to be really small businesses that have maybe been one or two people that maybe started it up, and that's a significant amount of resource on one or two people. And again, those are the big risks for small to medium-sized enterprises. A lot of the bigger organizations do still need to factor those risks in, but it might be a little bit easier for some of them to overcome some of those barriers. So, a big thing we always say, Roland, is your small to medium-sized enterprises are largely the real areas for business protection to grow in.
So if you were a business person sitting there today listening to this and you're thinking, okay, business protection, what would you say to that person of the things that they need to start thinking about their own business as to whether they're likely to need some kind of protection and what kind of route they should be taking with it?
A really good question. I would probably say the first steps to have a look at would be around what are the liabilities that the business has? What are the key people within the business? And depending on the setup, depending on the makeup of the business, do they have shareholders? Do they have partners? And then once you've got that idea of does the business have liabilities? Who are the key people? Who are the shareholders, the partners? What risk exposure does that bring to the business? So, for an example, if a business has liabilities, the risk exposure to that business might be to make sure that they have the ability to repay those liabilities, repay that loan. The protection solution there could maybe be some term assurance, some critical illness cover on the lives of the people responsible for repaying that loan. For key people, so another consideration for small business owners are who are the key people within the business. The risk exposure to there might be reduced profitability if there's an individual in that business that's crucial to bringing in revenue profit to the business. What would happen there if they passed away, if they became seriously ill? I guess also interruption to business activities, and also the actual cost of recruiting a replacement. Another thing for business owners to consider when it comes to key people. Do they have funds readily available to actually bring in new individuals to the business? And again, protection solution in that, on that type of umbrella, term assurance, again, critical illness, maybe some key person income protection. And the third area that I mentioned was, do they have shareholders? Do they have partners? So I think about understanding the risk exposure to that type of consideration. Who would take over the shares of that individual if they passed away? Do they have the desire? Do they have the will? Do they have the experience, expertise to take those shares of the business? Do the remaining business owners want them to take ownership of the business? And also, I guess, the family's financial security as well. Does the partner who's passed away become critically ill? What impact would that death, that serious illness, have on their family? Is there a protection solution that, again, could provide them with some form of financial support, and hopefully not putting too much financial burden on the business as well?
I'm going to add one more in there as well that I've just thought of as well. How the business is actually set up. Is the business set up that the shares pass on with the shareholder so they can distribute them in their own estate, or is that already taken into consideration? Do they not have personal control over their shares on their death? So it's looking into all those, the depths of your business and the way it has been set up previously to know what might happen in future.
Absolutely. I think that's one of the key things to think about with business protection. And it's actually, obviously, what is the cost of the key person replacing them? Actually, how is the business set up? And that is really one of the first things we would be looking at with business protection. How is that business set up? What is it set up to do if the worst happens? And then we can then look from there on about the different protection solutions that can come.
Fantastic. So something that I think is probably a very significant thing at the moment is obviously the pandemic. And what would you say that's highlighted to the business protection market of what the needs are of clients?
As much as I'd love to say it, you cannot hide anywhere from the fallout or the impact of the pandemic. And I think the business landscape across the UK has had a huge impact in light of COVID. Looking at some statistics, when it comes to small businesses across the UK. In 2021, at the start of last year, I think there was about 5.58 million private businesses in the UK. 99.9% of those businesses were small to medium-sized enterprises. So that's businesses with less than 250 people. And, I think, considering the pandemic, we've all become a little bit more aware of our morbidity, mortality over the last couple of years. And it's like businesses, particularly small businesses, have definitely become a lot more aware of the impact that that's had on them. I think in terms of actually looking at business protection as an opportunity, one of the areas where business protection can really come into its own is if you, as an advisor or as a small business owner, have know of individuals that have taken out some of the COVID loans over the last couple of years. That is a fantastic initial point of going to think about business protection to begin with. If you think about some of the support that the government have initiated at the beginning of the pandemic to help small businesses, things like the bounce back loan scheme. We've got the coronavirus business interruption loan scheme, or I think they call it CBILS for short. I think there's also a larger business interruption loan scheme as well. These are all significant financial support mechanisms that were introduced at the beginning of the pandemic, but they're also loan schemes. These are fantastic ways for businesses to actually start thinking about business protection for them. And if you look at the size of the loans that were paid out during the pandemic, it really does present a significant business protection conversation opportunity. So again, some of the research that I was looking at previously, the bounce back loan scheme, I believe there was about 1.5 million bounce back loans have been paid out since the pandemic started. So about 47 billion pounds worth of loans. The coronavirus business interruption loans, about 109,000 CBILS loans have been issued. It's worth about 26 billion pounds. And one of the things that I often say when we talk about business protection is, look immediately to the loans that you have in the business. And if you've got clients, or if you themselves have taken out a bounce back loan or a coronavirus business interruption loan scheme, is that worth protecting? If somebody in the business became seriously ill, passed away, they do still have that liability for repaying that loan. Do businesses have the finances available to pay that back immediately? And as I said, there's been such a monumental amount of loans paid out over the last couple of years. One of the initial points of contact to be thinking business protection really should be for businesses that have taken out some of those COVID loans.
That's a very, very good point. Something that I hadn't considered. So helped me out there on something as well. So when it comes to business protection, what's the best route to go down to be able to find the right business protection for you, for the client personally?
So a few things. I think when we're looking at actually building business protection solutions, I would say there's three main things to consider. First of all, you want to look at what's the cost of replacing the key person. Ideally, what contribution they make to maybe the profit of the business. You'd want to be looking at having that covered for at least a year. They may have directors' loan accounts. There may be other business loan accounts. Again, all of these need to be covered. And if these loans are secured to personal property, such as the family home, that also means personal estates might need to be covered as well. Secondly, I would think you need to think about whether we're covering a sole trader, a limited company, or a partnership. And again, kind of going back to what we said earlier about understand the makeup of the business. If a sole trader is a key person, rather than business protection, personal protection might end up being more suitable. But if the sole trader employs key people, maybe they've got a bank loan, they may want to then at that point consider business protection. For the likes of limited companies, a business protection plan would probably be best taken out on the likes of key people within the business. That company receives the benefits and spends the payouts really according to the needs of the business, which could be repaying that loan, as an example. For partnerships, limited liability partnerships, partners do essentially have equal liability for the debt of the business. So what you might want to look at here is if equity partners are in play, would they then look at taking a plan out on their own lives to cover the value of the loss of that key person? Cover could be under the name of the business trust. The benefits would be available to the surviving partners. And as it's something you mentioned a bit earlier on, Emma, or I think the final thing to consider when we're looking at solution, and it's a really important one to consider, is ownership issues and succession planning. So, for example, what happens to the person's business shares if they pass away? So again, definitely worth asking, worth asking clients, or having to think about yourselves. Does a business have a business will in place? And that business will is a great way to make sure that the estate of any shareholder who dies gets fair value, gets fair market value, that is, for the shares, and that the remaining shareholders still access that control of the business. So I would say those are probably the three key things to have a think about for building that business protection solution. The other thing that I've seen quite useful is, and I kind of alluded to it a little bit earlier on, is avoiding language like insurance, avoiding some of that jargon that, as an industry, we're terribly guilty of using, and actually using and thinking of language that business owners can relate to. Many business owners will be listening to the podcast today. They'll be very familiar with things like business continuity, business succession planning, and actually supporting the family. So if you think of business protection, as we mentioned earlier, about those three main types of business protection, those can be very easily converted into business continuity. So that's key person protection and loan protection. Business succession, that is your partnership and your shareholder protection. And then you're supporting the family of the business owners. That's your relevant life policies. So just trying to put it into a different way of speaking, different language. When we talk personal protection, you think how many individuals get turned off when they think of insurance, they think of death, they think critical illness. It's not really language that people want to engage with. People are much more happy engaging with languages that when you think about protecting their lifestyle, maintaining the standard of living, things that they can relate to. It's very similar in the business protection space. So as I said, different language can really put across that need for business protection.
I think, yeah, you're right. And it is understanding the person and what they want for their future and what's important to them. That's what this protection is there for, to continue to achieve the things that they want in the event of something really awful happening in somebody's life.
Absolutely. And nobody wants to think of anything awful happening in their lives. And, when you, as we've kind of said earlier, many business owners, many of these small to medium-sized business owners will have put their heart, their soul, it is a true passion for them, having built that business. What would it mean to them? What would that mean for everything that they've built if they had to take a significant amount of time off work, or somebody within the business had to take a significant amount of time off work, passed away prematurely, became seriously ill? Could that put a complete stop to that business that many people? Absolutely. It's a way of, you don't want to put everything that you've built towards and possibly are building towards in the future, in the hands of expected life events.
Very, very true. So when it comes to all of these different types of policies, just to give our listeners a bit of an idea, what happens? Are all of these policies medically underwritten? Can you just take them out? Can anyone get them? Is there any restrictions on anything? How do they tend to work?
So for the majority, pretty much all business protection cases will have to go through underwriting. One of the things that we do see when it comes to business protection is the actual underwriting process can take a little bit longer. And that's natural because we're talking about significant sums assured, and we're often dealing with a lot more than just a small sum assured that is maybe to cover a mortgage repayment. We're talking potential millions, hundreds of thousands. So there generally has to be a bit more of a significant underwriting procedure to go through. Some of the innovations that we're seeing in the marketplace are actually trying to help speed this underwriting process up. So again, not to do too much of a raw London plug, but one of the innovations that we've introduced into the market over the last couple of years is something called Underwrite Later. And what Underwrite Later is it's really for those that underwriting may take a little bit longer, but don't want to wait. We don't want to wait until the end of the underwriting process has happened. Yeah, absolutely. A lot of things to do. It's a very fast-paced life. So what we now give the option for business owner clients is where we require medical evidence, medical underwriting essentially, they can now get placed on risk straight away while we underwrite the application. So that's for life cover up to the value of £3.5 million. And again, that's it hopefully just gives business owner clients a bit more peace of mind that while we're going through underwriting, they are covered. They're covered for that point of time, and that's actually 6 months worth of underwriting that they get through Underwrite Later. Obviously, with business protection, we're often dealing with quite high sum assureds. There may be instances where financial underwriting has to happen. With Underwrite Later, where financial underwriting has to happen, that has to be done first before Underwrite Later will kick in. So if it's only medical underwriting that we need to do, Underwrite Later will appear as an option. If financial underwriting has to happen, then we'll need to do that first. But again, going back to your initial question, business protection is generally an underwritten aspect of protection.
Perfect. So I think it's quite clear to people what medical underwriting is, that obviously it's based on the lives assured if they've got any health conditions or anything. But just to clarify so everybody understands, what is financial underwriting? Is that based on what the business is valued at, what the profits are? What is that exactly?
Financial underwriting really is dependent on the sum assured of what the cover is that you're actually applying for. Now, generally, most protection providers will have some element of different levels of sum assureds that they'll need to have before financial underwriting actually kicks in. So, and it's all about the type of evidence that we would need to see to back up and justify the amount of sum assured that's been applied for. So, as an example, if we were applying for life cover for a business owner, and the sum assured was less than £2 million, the type of financial evidence that we may need to see would be the likes of an application form, and generally additional financial information probably wouldn't really need to be seen if it was less than £2 million from a Royal London perspective for standard life cover. When we start adding up that sum assured, so when the sum assured starts to go higher and higher, we do need to start seeing a little bit more different types of evidence. So, for example, where maybe the sum assured is between 2 million to maybe £3.5 million, we might need to see a financial questionnaire completed by the business owner. So again, it just gives us a bit more inclination as to the sources of the finance of the business, how the financial stability, the financial security of the business. Much like when you're going through medical underwriting, it's so we can make sure that as a business, we're to take as much risk as possible, and we're not putting ourselves as the businesses at too much of a risk as well. So as I say, definitely worth, when we're talking financial underwriting, speaking with your local regional BDM, understanding what the different types of underwriting limits are from a financial perspective and a medical perspective as well, because it will generally differ across the industry between different providers. Some of the type of things as well, if evidence is ever actually required, some of the things you might need to see are maybe from a business protection perspective for self-employed individuals, maybe 2 years worth of earnings. Maybe for key person income protection, you might generally need to see audited accounts that might cover the last maybe 2 to 3 years. So that's generally the type of financial evidence required if financial underwriting has to take place.
So it's just kind of proof that the cover that you're taking out is kind of in line with what your business is earning and the profits and the income that you're taking from it. You're not just kind of plucking a figure out of thin air that's a really high figure because you just want lots of money if something happens to anyone. And
Absolutely. It's about managing risk again from both the provider's perspective as well as the actual the business that's looking at taking on the cover as well.
Fantastic. Now, this is your moment where you can unashamedly do a complete plug for Royal London. Can you tell us a little bit about the protection offerings that you have and what they are, basically?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we've obviously scattered a little bit about Royal London throughout the call today. A couple of things I would say where we do stand out is on the underwriting front. Now, we've done a little bit of a flavour for underwriting there, but Underwrite Later, I would say, for business owner clients is a real game changer in this space. Instantly put on risk. Go over that 6-month period they have covered during that time. Again, it hopefully relaxes them during this time where it might take an extra few weeks, extra couple of months to go through underwriting. So hopefully it puts them at ease. One of the other aspects that I often talk about with business protection, and it's really a way of trying to grow client banks as well into the future. So if you think of a business owner, how likely is it that they may have children? Do some of the business owners have children? Is there an opportunity to be engaging the business owner with protecting the family, protecting future clients of yourself? And one of the ways that can be quite powerful is through children's cover, children's critical illness cover. And something that we offer on our business protection policies is the option to add on children's cover to the main adult policy. In one of the cover options, there's two options. You've got a standard children's cover and you've got enhanced children's cover at Royal London. Within the enhanced children's cover option at Royal London, there's something called a child conversion option. And what this is when the child turns 22 or 23, if they're in full-time education, they'll have 6 months to take out their own adult policy. There'll be no medical underwriting. If they're smoking at that point in time, there would be no smoker rates, so we can't encourage that. But it is hopefully a way of engaging not just the younger generation, the next generation, but potentially the future owners of that business. If we're talking business owner clients, if it's a family-run business, is there a way to engage those individuals with protection? And the child conversion option that we offer at Royal London, there are some other providers in the market that do offer it, I think can really go a long way to help support that. The other thing I would say from a business protection perspective is, and most protection providers offer this these days, and this comes down to value added services. So what we offer at Royal London is a service called Helping Hand for Business. Now, Helping Hand is a free to use service. It comes on all advised protection policies. With business owner clients, if they take out a business protection policy with Royal London, they will have access to a dedicated nurse for the person that's covered, their partner and their children. But from a business perspective, they also get access to free legal support and free recruitment support as well. And if you think many small to medium-sized business owners, how many of them will have their own legal team? How many of them will have their own recruitment specialists? They may do. Exactly. 100%. So one of the beautiful aspects of the Helping Hand for Business offering is that these business owner clients have access to legal support that they can access for any real issue. It could be business growth. It could be writing a business will. It could be just looking at some of the cross option agreements, from going into a little more detail of the actual business protection solutions. That legal support team are there to help them however they need to. And the recruitment services as well, if the business is needing temporary, permanent replacements, the recruitment services can help that business get access to a temporary list of candidates to plug that immediate gap if there's been a long-term absence or if there's been a death. And also if the business needs to look at longer-term options, that recruitment service can help with advertisements of roles, interview processes, etc. So again, it's about helping that business stay active, the ability for them to keep trading when they could have lost a key person. It could be a really difficult time for the business. So I'd say Helping Hand for Business, looking at the convertibility of the plan on children's cover, Underwrite Later. And of course, if this is a new space for many advisors, if business protection is an area that maybe is new to you, or an area that you've maybe dabbled in the past, but you want to try and explore it a little bit further, we've got a whole range of approach letters. Now, these approach letters are fantastic ways of just maybe dropping a little email, dropping a letter to a client, maybe their business owner client, where actually there wasn't a conversation about business protection had previously. These approach letters are just little gentle nudges to say, actually, do you know what? We've maybe spoke about setting up a personal mortgage in the past. Maybe we spoke about something or other in the past. But actually, we've now got this option of talking business protection. Here are the reasons why it might be useful. This is how we can do it. And maybe adding in some details at the bottom about this is when we're available next to have a chat. So it's just, again, helping advisors and helping business owners think about the importance and the need for business protection, but actually helping that conversation start as well.
Incredible. I must admit, I'm very impressed with the Underwriting Now thing. I had a client that not long ago I did some business protection for, and I think it took nearly 18 months for the medical underwriting. So it can be very, very long-winded. And obviously in all that time, they weren't actually covered. So the Royal London offer in there is a very fantastic feature, I think.
Absolutely. I would say if you do want more information on it, do get in touch with your local BDM or your account manager, and they'll be able to talk you through in a bit more detail. But it does really sort of play in that space of, if you've got business owner clients, it can be a lot longer process getting that cover started. So actually having that risk that they're not covered over that period of time, it's 6 months on for Underwrite Later, hopefully should put them at ease.
So as I mentioned earlier, the podcast is called The Money Compass. And we do all like a little bit of travel. So the last question that I'm going to put to you today is, what is your absolute favourite holiday destination?
Oh, that's a fantastic question, Emma. It's for me, it's been a distant memory, you could say, traveling. obviously in the role that I do, I travel the UK every week, so I get to see a lot of nice spots in the UK. That's definitely not a bad thing. But for me, the most memorable and probably the best travel location I've been to, and it's a passionate area for me, is India. And a couple of reasons for that. The last trip I went on to India was where my wife and I got engaged. So there was a lot of personal memories in there, but from a cultural perspective, I just thought it was a fantastic place to visit. Seeing the Taj Mahal and all of those glamorous sights of India is it's an incredible thing to see, but it also does open your eyes to some of the slightly more impoverished side of the world, and just it really does make you grateful for where we live and what we do. And it's a real eye-opening place, but one that I would absolutely recommend everybody tries to go to if they can. And it's that is for me is my standout travel location, and one that I would love to visit again in the future.
Wonderful. Maybe you can take your little one there one day in the future.
Hopefully.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. If anyone has any questions, obviously they can get in touch through the podcast or the Facebook page. And I'm sure if there's any questions that I don't know the answer to, I'm sure Gregor will be more than happy to answer those in future.
Absolutely. Certainly will be.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Emma.
And with that, we've completed today's episode. We hope you have enjoyed following along with us today and taking another step closer to a financially secure future.
If you've enjoyed today's podcast, you can head over to themoneycompass.co.uk, where you can find out more information, hints and tips from today's episode.
If you'd like to get more involved, share your own experiences and learn from a friendly community on a similar journey to you, why not join us in our Facebook group, The Money Compass, where we will support you in navigating your way to financial success.
Thank you for listening, and see you next time.